Hello, everyone, and welcome. Today, I'm joined by Lyuba Kovacevic. She is a senior compliance leader with deep experience building and leading global compliance frameworks across EMEA. Her work spans high-risk industries, international regulations, and the growing intersection between compliance, ESG, and corporate governance. Lyuba has spent her career shaping programs that work in the real world, programs that live beyond the policy binder and actually influence decisions in legal, finance, HR, operations, and even executive leadership. She has led large-scale implementations of the EU Whistleblower Directive, SAPN2, and ISO standards, helped organizations navigate cultural and regional differences, and also built systems that support risk prevention and long-term business resilience. A lot of what we're going to talk about today links directly to why tools like FaceUp even exist. FaceUp is an anonymous reporting platform that gives employees a safe way to speak up and helps leaders respond with clarity and confidence. Anonymous reports are often the very first signal of issues that would not appear through standard channels. And that's exactly what we're already supporting in more than 3,500 organizations worldwide. I am Daniela from FaceUp, and I am very excited about today's conversation with Lyuba. Lyuba, thank you so much for being here today.
Hi Daniela, thank you for having me. I have to say this is really a topic that is close to me as to my values. So I kind of didn't hesitate to accept this invitation and happy to be here today with you.
Well, thank you so much for that. I was looking over your LinkedIn and also in the prep conversation that we had, and I was very, very excited for this today. So let's start a little bit at the beginning. And I would like to know from you what drew you into the compliance work in the first place?
Yeah, thank you for this question. So I've been many years in legal and I like it. And then I pivoted fully into compliance and I have to say I love it. And what I love on this is like this prevention. So I like to help people to do the right thing early rather than fixing headlines later. Yeah, so like this work in legal or in compliance, it has same rules. However, we look at the problems like with different lenses. So in compliance, I like that we focus more on culture, on trust, and practical guidelines that really helps people to do their work daily. Yeah.
That is such an interesting perspective of thinking of it more as a prevention rather than having to fix the issue later. Um, can you remember a specific moment in your career that made you realize this is the field you wanted to stay in?
Yeah, so I think back to 2010, even there was no regulation like we have at the moment on protection of whistleblowers. So we had that time in my previous company, we had ethical line and I was part of the ethical committee. And I remember, so we got the report and we handled it quickly and fairly and it didn't become the crisis. Yeah, so that taught me how to kind of value the trust, early action, and of course, clear process. So this was kind of the moment I realized I wanna dedicate more to this kind of prevention, to this compliance field. Yeah, and that was the moment for me to pivot later. Fully
So
into
you so you saw firsthand the benefit or value of prevention instead of having to clean up a messy situation.
Exactly, exactly. It's kind of two ways communication for the company to learn before it's really issue, before the regulators come in, and also for the employees to kind of to notice, to say what they see.
Hmm.
So really, I see big value in that.
Okay, okay. And I bet also cost savings across the organization. As I mentioned, I had a look at your profile, and it's wow, I have to say. And I couldn't help but notice that you have built and led programs in different countries and also different industries. How have these experiences shaped your approach today?
Yes, so working with different countries, with different regions, so and always kind of working for like a mother company that wants to join these regions. So that taught me global. So usually we had a global standards and we need, local executions. And this kind of good adoption comes only when we respect culture, language, and of course Works Council's realities that we have, for example, in EMEA region, like widely. So really respect for this kind of local differences. That's really important when you want to implement global standards.
I love that, global. I'm going to remember this for my other conversations. So when you first started working across regions, especially in EMEA, what surprised you the most about this work?
Yeah, so the maturity, let's say, of the regions is a little bit different. Yeah, so the same message lands differently in Spain, in Germany, or for example, in Turkey. And also, like here in Europe, we have so much history behind. So when we were implementing these speak up problems, I often heard like, it has kind of like a negative consequences, like we don't want to use it because it kind of resonates with something negative with people. So I focus on demystifying these kind of channels and more like on explaining the benefits for people. So that's what kind of, I realize and that what is kind of imminent, especially to the European region.
Hmm. And I completely agree with you because my cultural background is both Belgian and Portuguese. And even between these two countries, I know that there are quite a bit of cultural differences. And what you just said reminded me of a conversation I had some time ago in which the investigator said that we need to shift compliance from sounding like something that is with punishment, that it comes with punishment, and more with the benefits for the person that is reporting as well as the company. So, completely agree with what you just mentioned there. And you just mentioned your experience a little bit across EMEA. What is the most underestimated challenge from the outside when you're leading these compliances, the compliance policy across EMEA?
Hmm. So I don't have in mind like just one challenge. I think we have a couple of them in the EMEA region. And that's like we just said, like, different maturity levels in the regions. We have unions and work councils that we have to take in consideration. We have strict privacy regimes, many regulation. So we are not bored. I think European Union sends us every time something new, and that's good. And also what I noticed recently, so there is kind of increase of usage of contingent workers. And they are not like, classic employees. So all of that needs like integrity coverage and tailored rollout. Yeah, so I think these are kind of challenges that I see in EMEA region at the moment.
Um, do you mind elaborating a little bit more on this last point, the usage of contingency workers?
Yeah,
What
so
does that look like?
so they are not classical employees that would be directly, abide by companies' policies and like, we would focus on them with the trainings and with, like communication. They are employees of, different, legal employer. However, they appear in the workplace. So we have to kind of, let's say company, we have to tackle them a little bit differently because they are also risk of co-employment, but still we have to cover them with our expectations. So I think this is kind of, challenge that we are facing. So to exclude, co-employment risk, while still kind of communicate to them what are the expectations on integrity, even because they are both in our workplace together with our employee, with our own employees.
Mm-hmm. And I've actually been seeing that in my conversations with prospects and customers that you have a lot of organizations in EMEA that have their core employees, but then that they are also hiring contractors or consultants across the region. And there is always a lot of questions of how should we be treating them, for example, with the whistleblowing directive. So you're mentioning that this is one of the challenges that you're facing at the moment. My follow-up question there is, could you share an example of an operational hurdle or an obstacle that you had to solve when implementing one of these frameworks in a specific region?
Well, I think it has same patterns when we are implementing some new regulation, let's say even the speak up tool. So always, it requires collaboration with the, legal, HR teams, IT, digital teams, right? Sometimes even marketing to support it. And we have to align on privacy and labor rules. And also we have to align with works councils in the region and localize trainings, and then it can be like successfully, faced to be live. So I think on that, like experience, like this alignment with cross-functional teams is it's kind of a process. So it's not just one meeting or a couple of meetings, but in my experience, it's very important to set up clear owners and to have like simple metrics to track and a steady cadence, and then it can be successful.
So the cross-team collaboration is not something that happens overnight. You need to have a system in place in order to make it work smoothly.
Yeah, definitely. And also like some mutual trust, and because every team, they have their own priorities. So it's really kind of on some skills to get their buy-in and to help you to roll it out.
So it's a little bit about influencing people as well, I see. Do you have any best practice that you've seen works best when trying to build this trust and relationship between the cross-functional teams?
Well, I don't have like a recipe. It's more like some continuous process, really like helping each other. And I think this is kind of normal, respect each other and simplify this kind of rules. So also explain so why it makes sense, why it will help, all organization in total, like why we have to collaborate. So I think explaining and kind of with simple words and showing this kind of what it will be the impact, how it will help the business, because in the end of the day, we all work for one company and our kind of goal should be that our company is successful. So to kind of have ready these outcomes, the benefits that it will bring to everybody.
That makes perfect sense. And I think that will work across teams and not even just in compliance specifically. I'm just going to quickly pause here to tell our audience if you have any questions, doubts, or even examples that you would like to share, you can leave them in the comments. If we have time, we will cover them live. If we don't, we will get back to you afterwards to discuss your questions and your concerns. So just wanted to add a quick reminder there before we move on. And Liuba, I think that the next thing that we would like to cover, and I think that your experience is very valuable for, is the evolution that has been happening in compliance over the years. So, in your experience and your perspective, how has the role of compliance evolved over, let's say, the last decade?
This is a very good question, and I see that how it's evolving every time. So I think what is important is that it change from some like a rule keeper to a strategic risk partner. So compliance should enable decision and use actively data and basically shape culture. Not just be like, as you mentioned, let somebody consider compliance as some policeman and like, some organization that punish the others. This is completely wrong. We should really shape the culture so employees go home and they feel like these are the values that helps me to do my work better and kind of, allows me also to go home safe, because in the end of the day, compliance goes hand in hand with safety. And if we follow these rules, if we follow these values, people can get home safe to their families. Yeah, so I think this is kind of, to be the strategic business partner rather than some rule keeper or even worse, like a policeman in the organization.
So, from what you're saying, both companies and the people within companies sometimes still see compliance as the policeman, as the punisher, and not as the people who are keeping them safe throughout their journey. Did I understand that correctly?
Yeah. So I think, our kind of, the role should be, and compliance should be kind of seen as a strategic risk partner rather than this, rule keeper. Because, if somebody says compliance equals to policies, code of conduct, and trainings, that's not just that, this impact what we do should show up in behavior of, employees, of outcomes, and in the mutual trust.
Got it. And that is an important evolution, I think, from the early days in compliance into now that it is becoming a little bit more impactful within culture. You have also an interesting experience, Liba, because aside from compliance, you also have experience in ESG and sustainability. How is this shaping the expectations placed on compliance teams today?
Yeah, so that was really great experience, and also helped me to get other skills and like view into other businesses. So I'm very happy for this experience. And I see that ESG or sustainability regulation requirements kind of raised expectation on transparency on the companies and on due diligence. So I see it very positively. And compliance function now has kind of ability to connect these non-financial risks with the strategy and reporting, and like sit at the table when they speak about this future company strategy. So I think this is a great impact on compliance.
Mhm. It's interesting that you mentioned the financial risk as well. So, is there where you see the overlap between ESG and compliance strategy, or do you think it goes even broader than that?
So yeah, it goes even broader because this covers in the end third-party risk, human rights, data integrity, and also board reporting. Yeah? So ESG kind of, it's the same muscles, but it's a broader field, and I'm glad that compliance can really connect it.
Mhm.
So it's kind of, if you look at ESG, at these three numbers, so you have like environment, you have a social part, and you have governance. And I think governance is the G, that part. But however, when we report, so it connects all these three aspects, because there's really big focus on this transparency, and now this report, sustainability report, must be audited. So a lot of focus, and it will just improve the situations in the companies, and they really focus on this human rights and this kind of whole value chain reporting.
You've mentioned quite a few interesting things so far. So, you mentioned how the role in compliance is becoming broader, how it is involving ESG, culture, safety, even preventing financial risk. So, it is quite a broad scope. And I imagine that it takes someone special to be able to do it well. What do you think separates a good compliance officer from one that is truly influential?
Yes, so I think the good one, the one knows the rules, knows the policy, and knows the regulation, knows the law. But the influential one translates this risk into business language, because we are in the company, so we have to really translate it into language that our colleague speaks and simplify. And then we can, earn the trust and move the needle in the company.
But based on what you just mentioned so far in the conversation, I think I know what your answer to this question will be, but I really, really want to hear it from you. What behaviors or skills do you think make the biggest difference in becoming an influential compliance officer?
So I think it's curiosity, because what we just discussed, it's not just one field. We should be curious what the other business segments are doing, what the other departments are doing. Only then we can be invited to the table and we can help them to mitigate the risk. So I would say definitely it's curiosity, and then clarity to be able to translate these rules into simple guidelines, because only that businesses will react on it, because they are super busy and they want it very clear. And we can influence with data, because we should have access, let's say, to the metrics. We should see how many cases were reported from every region or other kind of data, and by that we can influence their decision. And I think we should have, as a compliance officers, we should have courage and bit of diplomacy, because sometimes we have to say no, but here's how to do it better. Yeah. So to give them solution. So bit of diplomacy also, I think, it's good to have.
Hmm. And it makes sense because no one wants to hear no or that their idea is not good. So being diplomatic about it will help maintain good relationships. But what you mentioned about curiosity around what other business units are doing and the clarity to translate the rules into simple guidelines. And then the last part, which I think is really, really data. It shouldn't be just guesswork. We should be able to have proof with data to support our recommendations or why we are guiding something in a certain direction. So I think that's really, really valuable what you've shared. And because in your work, Liuba, you do work directly with leadership teams, you are even in the leadership team yourself. What happens inside organizations when executives lack visibility into what's happening in the compliance world?
Yeah, so I think, it's clear, this blind spot grow, and this issue that could be discovered, so they surface later, and then it's much more difficult to kind of mitigate them, right? And also culture in some remote teams, or where we don't have big visibility, so that culture can quietly fragment, because the teams will never create their own norms. Imagine like some remote sites. So it sometimes it looks like that the teams, they create their own, like a kingdom, their own norms. So I think that's important to keep contact, and the speak up tools can be the solution to that.
So interesting that you mentioned that teams will create their own kingdoms. Very, very interesting. And so you're mentioning here that blind spots can grow, issues might surface later than they should. And then I guess the reaction from leadership is, how come we didn't know about this earlier? Um, what are the long-term risks of having this disconnect? And if you can, is there an example that you can share of when this went a little bit wrong?
Yeah, so the worst thing is like the regulatory exposure, rises. So the worst scenario are some penalties, right? Reputation damage, but it can also influence like a talent. So the talents can leave the company when they don't want to be connected with organizations that are in newspapers, right? So these are for me like kind of clear, examples that every company should try to avoid.
Mhm. So on the one hand is the regulatory penalties, and on the other hand is I think not only the loss of talent, but also perhaps difficulty hiring new talent, because as you said, people don't want to be associated, and this can be really costly for organizations. So yes, these are definitely two big risks.
Also, reputational damage towards the customers, towards the clients. So it's really not, something that companies should just overlook. It can have big
I
impact.
Yes, absolutely. And we shouldn't forget that one, the reputational damage towards clients. And if we take all that we've talked about so far, Liuba, and we look a little bit into the future, how do you see the compliance landscape in Europe evolve?
Well, I think what is clear, and I don't have to, be kind of visionary, but what is clear, so we will need more AI governance. And also, I think what requires attention of, regulation are supply chain due diligence. So this is still something that it requires our focus.
In my conversations with organizations here in Europe, I hear two different stances. Either people that are so excited about it, that want everything with AI, and then others that are a little bit more skeptical or worried about it taking over. What do you think about it? Where do you stand on AI?
Well, I think it's a great tool, but we should be mindful. And definitely, companies before starting it, they should have a good, AI governance. Because it's like as another tool. If we, companies can decide to have their internal tool, like on AI, or at least to provide some trainings to the teams on usage of the open AI tools, because really something that they share with that can be publicly misused. So is this anything like somebody would post it on social media? It's the same kind of situation here. So I think good AI governance before companies decide whether to use it broadly or just for something. I think we cannot avoid it. Let's say teams will like to use it, and they should, because for some activities, really, it's time saving and even like more safety for the teams. To use AI than to do manual work. And so we cannot avoid it. It's here. Just do it carefully, mindfully, and inform teams about the risks. So I think this is kind of my thought on that, and it will be here more with us. I think we cannot stop it.
I agree with you, and we also see that even the European Union is quite busy in terms of having some governance and rules around the usage of AI. So I think we will see an evolution happening within Europe for that. And then companies need to do their own homework or due diligence, as you are mentioning. And as we're speaking about AI, let's speak about technology and data a little bit more broadly. Where do you see technology playing a role in the next generation of compliance programs?
Yes, so what definitely I see, data earns the seat at the table. We need data to kind of, as I said, to build the trust, to kind of show the impact. And what I see we could do better is to use this data to forecast, to kind of, let's say, prevent, not just to report on the previous cases. Yeah, this is something, kind of not just enough. Yeah, so I think I would like to forecast more and prevent any issues by having this data. And yeah, I think only kind of data-driven decision should have impact on business.
Mhm. And as a follow-up to that, Luba, you're mentioning data and its importance to make decision. Which parts of the work do you think will still benefit most from digital tools, data, and which do you think will still need to have a human judgment?
Yeah, so I see that. So, for example, AI could be good, by analyzing, some intake, some analytics, preparing dashboards. But human part is very important during investigations, providing some, I don't know, ethical judgments, And also in remediation, when we talk, when we decide about, like, let's say, disciplinary actions or something. So there, I think human part is really important and should stay.
I would even say that it's like two sides of the same coin. You need the tools and the data on one hand, and then you need a human in order to be able to interpret things and have that ethical judgment that you were just discussing. And the remediation part is also very important.
Exactly.
And Liebe, since we're talking about tools and data as well, what role do you think reporting tools play in detecting issues early and surfacing concerns that maybe would not show up in standard channels or that people would not be comfortable going and speaking with their manager?
Yeah, so I think we also like tackle it during our conversation already. I see really importance, especially with remote teams or even with small teams, when people maybe they don't feel comfortable to speaking directly to their manager, right? But if they have this possibility and to do it also anonymously, that kind of gives them more opportunities and they don't hesitate to speak, and which is very important. We really, I think, I could see in my work that it can really save their lives if it's reported early. Let's say somebody doesn't wear the safety helmets or is forced to bypass some procedures. So it's really important to speak about it because it can save their lives and can also improve the quality, right? And all of that has a big impact. Or just speaking about the relationship in the team, all of that, could be reported. And if the companies enable anonymous reporting, this is increasing only the amount of cases that are reported. So I think companies can offer both reporting anonymously, but also shared, the names, and protect, of course, all. I think also we are, it's good, to track the anonymity rate because that can also indicate a lot to the company. So maybe it can indicate that some teams are afraid of retaliation. And then you can work with them and explain and to reveal, what's the situation there. So it's very important to have all these possibilities.
So you would even treat the number of reporting as data to make decisions internally, if people do feel like they have a safe culture to speak up or not.
Yeah, exactly.
Mhm. You mentioned now remote teams and smaller organizations, but what is the role that you see of anonymous reporting tools, or even if people are able to self-identify, even in companies that are like a multinational and are operating across multiple countries?
Well, I think the principle is the same. So really, it enables to see the problems early. As I said, they become the issue in headlines. Yeah. So I think this is the biggest advantage, and it's a really two-ways tool. So employees can share their issues, their problems. They are protected. Their confidentiality is protected of these cases, and simultaneously the company learns what is something that I don't know, what we should be solving to protect the clients, to protect the employees. So I think this is the biggest advantage to
Mm-hmm.
have this.
Mm-hmm. And considering your work, what has been the feedback from employees after you implemented a reporting tool?
So just after implementation, there's need to be done a lot of communication, explaining, revealing the process, right? So only then, people trust it and start to use it. So I think, of course, as a compliance officer, we have to protect confidentiality, but if possible, that would work, I think it's to revealing as much as possible. So at least the number of cases, revealing the process, revealing the outcomes. So for example, how many corrective action that decision to report can have. So that always is great. And also with that, it's important that when people raise the concern, so it's important to investigate it promptly, because only this kind of accurate or timely this feedback, then it works and it has impact, and employees see the yeah, really this was helpful, what I did was okay, and I can do it next time and help company to prevent the risk again.
Mm-hmm. It's so relevant that you mentioned this, Luba, and we recently did a webinar on the common mistakes and best practices when implementing a reporting tool. And what you just mentioned was covered there. The fact that you need to have a lot of communication when you are implementing, showing what it good looks like, showing what the result and impact is, or the results of an investigation, in order to build the trust in the process. So it's not about just a check mark, we have a tool in, and we forget about it.
Exactly. It's continuous communication. We cannot lose the momentum. So I think, it really requires constantly speaking with people, showing them the, metrics, showing them the results. Only then we can, keep this, speak up programs alive.
Mm-hmm. Have you heard any comment back from employees about the program that you've implemented?
Yeah. So we are, I think it's good to ask for the feedbacks continuously. Like, how did they feel? Do they have any doubts? What, we could do better. So I think it's always to have this conversation.
Mm-hmm. And now on to the final section, Liba, which is a little bit about the practical wisdom that you can share with others that might be starting their career or want to implement something better. If you could only teach one lesson to someone starting off as a compliance professional, what would it be?
So I think I would have in mind, to be really like a business partner. Start by listening to teams and business needs, and build it together. Build this kind of compliance program together and track real outcomes. And yeah, keep the Speak Up channel trusted all year around.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And now into our last question of the day. You have quite a few years of experience under your belt within global compliance, not just local. What is the insight or the core principle that you carry with you into every new role or project that you start?
Yeah, so I think it's important to build a trust with the team, and by listening, yeah, only then it can unlock this influence, because without that, having policies, they just sit on shelves, yeah, and we want them to be alive. We want them that people really takes them as their values, that something, is not negotiable, that, will really take them home safe. So this is kind of, something I have in mind, whenever I start any implementation or role.
Mm-hmm. I love that, that it's not something that you just keep on the shelf, but you actually use it. Uh, Liba, I want to thank you so much for the time that you spent with us today and also in the preparation for today. Thank you for joining us and for bringing this thoughtful insight to the conversation. You seem very, very passionate about the work that you do, and that is awesome to see. And from the conversation, your experience across global compliance frameworks shows that it's really important for organizations to build systems that support transparency, trust, that are going to protect people, and also give leadership that clear view of what is happening across regions in order to prevent problems down the line. For those that are listening, this is exactly why tools like FaceUp exist and where they can help. So anonymous reporting and clear case handling processes makes it easier for teams to surface concerns early and also to respond with confidence and clarity, no matter what the size or structure of your organization might be. So if you want to explore what that could look like in your environment, you're welcome to try FaceUp through a free trial that is available on our homepage. Or if you prefer, you can also book a short demo if you'd rather that we walk through it together. Liba, thank you so much for your time today. And thank you to everyone that joined as well.
Thank you for the invitation and greetings to everybody who joined this session. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.